The day you were diagnosed with type 2 diabetes, something changed. Not just your blood sugar, not just your doctor's appointments. Your relationship with food changed. Suddenly, every bite felt like a decision. Every dessert felt like a risk. Every grocery store trip became an exercise in self-control. And for many people, one of the first things to disappear was ice cream. The thinking seemed logical. Ice cream contains sugar. Sugar raises blood sugar. Therefore, ice cream must be the enemy. But what if that assumption isn't entirely true? What if some of the products marketed specifically to people trying to control blood sugar are actually creating bigger glucose spikes than the dessert they replaced? And what if the real story has less to do with eliminating ice cream and more to do with understanding how your body actually responds to food? Because when researchers started looking deeper at how different frozen desserts affect blood sugar, they uncovered something surprising. The answer wasn't nearly as simple as most people had been told. And for millions of adults living with type 2 diabetes, that discovery could completely change what's sitting in their freezer. Imagine spending years avoiding something you love because you believe it's dangerous. Then discovering that the replacement you've been eating instead may actually be worse. That sounds frustrating, but it happens every day. A person gets diagnosed with diabetes. They immediately start removing foods from their life. Cookies disappear. Cake disappears. Ice cream disappears. Then they begin searching for healthier alternatives. Low-fat frozen yogurt, light ice cream, sugar-free desserts, products covered in words like healthy, smart, guilt-free, diabetic-friendly, and low-fat. The packaging looks responsible. The marketing sounds scientific. The promises feel reassuring. But packaging is not biology, and marketing is not metabolism. Your body doesn't care what the label says. Your body only responds to what enters your bloodstream. And that is where the real story begins. To understand why, we need to look at what happens after you eat traditional full-fat ice cream. Most people focus on the sugar, but your body experiences much more than sugar. When you eat real, full-fat ice cream, 3 natural mechanisms immediately begin slowing digestion. The first is fat. Fat delays gastric emptying, meaning food leaves your stomach more slowly. Instead of glucose flooding into your bloodstream all at once, it enters gradually. The second mechanism is protein. Dairy protein stimulates hormones involved in satiety and glucose regulation. One of those hormones is GLP-1. You may recognize that name because modern diabetes medications are designed to mimic its effects. The third mechanism is temperature. Cold foods take longer to process. Before digestion can proceed efficiently, the body must first warm the food. That creates another small delay. Individually, these effects seem modest. Together, they act like brakes. And those brakes can dramatically change how quickly glucose rises after eating. Now compare that with many low-fat products. To remove fat while maintaining flavor, manufacturers often add extra sugars, starches, or sweeteners. The very ingredient slowing digestion disappears. The result can be a faster glucose spike despite the healthier appearance. This is not a coincidence. This is how food science actually works. And once you understand it, you start looking at frozen desserts very differently. This is why understanding food is more important than fearing food. And it is why the first freezer-friendly option on this list might surprise you. Cottage cheese ice cream. At first, it sounds strange. But when blended until smooth and frozen, full-fat cottage cheese develops a texture remarkably similar to soft serve. The real advantage isn't the taste, it's the protein. A single serving can provide multiple times more protein than traditional ice cream. That protein slows digestion. It increases satiety. It helps support muscle maintenance. And after age 60, muscle becomes increasingly important. Every year, adults naturally lose muscle mass. This process accelerates with age. Maintaining adequate protein intake becomes one of the most effective ways to preserve strength, mobility, and metabolic health. So while enjoying a frozen dessert, you're also supporting one of the most important aspects of healthy aging. That is not a small thing. That is a meaningful shift in how you can think about food. You are no longer just eating for pleasure, you are eating with purpose. And those two things do not have to be in conflict. The second option is homemade frozen Greek yogurt. Notice the word homemade, because homemade and commercial frozen yogurt are often completely different products. Commercial versions frequently contain large amounts of added sugar. Homemade versions allow you to control every ingredient. Full-fat Greek yogurt provides protein. It provides healthy fats. And perhaps most importantly, it contains beneficial probiotic cultures. These beneficial bacteria don't simply support digestion. Research suggests they may also play a role in improving insulin sensitivity. In other words, you're not only reducing the likelihood of a blood sugar spike today, you may also be supporting better metabolic health over time. The connection between gut health and blood sugar regulation is still being studied, but the early evidence is compelling enough that it deserves attention. Your gut is not separate from your metabolism. They are deeply connected systems, and feeding one often supports the other. There is something else worth mentioning here. When you make food at home, something psychological shifts as well. You stop being a passive consumer. You start becoming someone who understands what they are putting into their body. That awareness alone can change long-term habits in ways that no medication or diet plan fully can. And there is something else worth mentioning. Enjoyment matters. Many people approach diabetes management as if suffering is required. They believe the more miserable the diet, the healthier it must be. But long-term success rarely works that way. A plan that feels impossible usually becomes impossible. A plan that includes realistic pleasures is far more likely to last. And sustainability is ultimately what matters most. This brings us to an important question. What happens when two people eat the exact same dessert? The answer is fascinating. Imagine person A eats a serving of ice cream in the middle of the afternoon on an empty stomach. Now imagine person B eats the same serving after a balanced dinner containing protein, fiber, and healthy fats. Same dessert, same portion, different outcome. Because food does not exist in isolation. Meals matter. Context matters. Timing matters. Your body responds to combinations of foods, not individual ingredients alone. That is why a moderate serving of dessert after a balanced meal often produces a very different glucose response than the same dessert eaten by itself. Understanding this principle changes everything. Instead of asking, "Can I eat this?" you begin asking, "How can I eat this intelligently?" And that shift in mindset is powerful. Because diabetes management isn't about perfection, it's about consistency. People who constantly swing between extreme restriction and overeating often struggle more than people who follow a balanced, sustainable approach. Food should not control your life. Knowledge should. The third freezer option involves sweeteners many people have heard about, but few truly understand. Erythritol and stevia. Unlike sugar, these sweeteners contribute little or no glucose response. That is why certain ice cream products using them have become increasingly popular among people managing blood sugar. But there is still an important rule. Read labels carefully. The front of the package is marketing. The ingredient list is reality. Two products can both claim to be sugar-free while producing completely different effects inside your body. One product may use erythritol and stevia. Another may use a blend of ingredients that behaves very differently in your bloodstream. You cannot know without reading the full list. 5 seconds of reading can save weeks of confusion. This brings us to another sweetener generating significant attention. Allulose. Unlike many alternative sweeteners, allulose appears to do more than simply avoid raising blood sugar. Emerging research suggests it may actually help reduce post-meal glucose responses. Think of most sweeteners as neutral passengers. Allulose appears to participate in the process. That makes it particularly interesting for individuals focused on glucose control. Scientists are still investigating exactly how it works, but early clinical findings are promising enough that many nutrition researchers are paying close attention. Of course, specialty products often cost more, and that raises another important point. Healthy options don't always need to come from expensive packages. Sometimes the best solution is already in your kitchen. Consider frozen banana soft serve. Most people hear the word banana and immediately think sugar. But something interesting happens during freezing. The structure of the starch changes. Some of that starch becomes resistant starch. Resistant starch behaves differently from ordinary starch. It resists digestion. It functions more like fiber, and it may support improved insulin sensitivity. When combined with natural peanut butter, cinnamon, and unsweetened cocoa, frozen banana creates a surprisingly satisfying dessert. No added sugar, no artificial ingredients, no complicated label. Just real food. And sometimes, real food is exactly what the body responds to best. It is also worth noting that cinnamon on its own has attracted considerable research interest. Some studies suggest it may help improve how cells respond to insulin. The effect is modest, but when combined with other smart choices, every small advantage adds up. Sprinkling cinnamon on a frozen dessert is not a cure, but it is a simple, inexpensive habit that costs nothing and may offer something real in return. But while there are excellent options available, there are also products that deserve caution. The first category is low-fat and fat-free ice cream. At first glance, they seem like obvious choices. Less fat sounds healthier. Yet the reality is often more complicated. Removing fat frequently means replacing flavor elsewhere. That replacement often comes from sugars or rapidly digestible carbohydrates. The very ingredient helping slow digestion disappears, and blood sugar may rise faster as a result. The label looks responsible. The blood sugar response often tells a different story. The second category requiring caution is commercial frozen yogurt. This surprises many people. Frozen yogurt has developed a health halo. People assume yogurt automatically means healthy, But many commercial frozen yogurts contain enormous amounts of added sugar. In some cases, more than traditional ice cream. Add toppings, syrups, candy pieces, and oversized portions, and the glucose load can become enormous. What began as a healthier choice quickly turns into something very different. The format feels virtuous, the biology does not agree. And then we arrive at perhaps the most misleading category of all: sugar-free ice cream sweetened with maltitol. This is where many people unknowingly run into trouble. The label says sugar-free. The consumer feels safe. But maltitol is not metabolically neutral. Unlike erythritol, maltitol can still raise blood sugar significantly. The glycemic index of maltitol is higher than most people realize. And because people assume the product is harmless, they often eat larger portions. The combination can create a bigger glucose impact than expected. For older adults, there may be an additional issue: digestive discomfort, bloating, gas, diarrhea. These side effects are common enough that they deserve attention. The lesson here is simple: never trust the front label. Always read the ingredients. The sweetener being used matters more than the claim on the front of the package. Now let's put everything together. If you want better blood sugar control while still enjoying frozen desserts, follow a few practical rules. First, prioritize portions. A small serving enjoyed intentionally is very different from eating directly from a container. Research consistently shows that portion size matters as much as food choice. You can make a smart selection and still undermine yourself by eating too much of it. Second, pair dessert with a balanced meal. Protein, healthy fats, and fiber help create a more favorable metabolic environment. Third, avoid eating dessert on an empty stomach. When your stomach is empty, glucose enters the bloodstream faster. Eating dessert after a meal creates a slower, more manageable rise. Fourth, read ingredient labels carefully. Watch for hidden sugars and misleading sweeteners. The first 3 ingredients tell you the most about what you are actually consuming. Fifth, test your response. Your glucose meter is one of the most powerful tools you own. No article, no advertisement, no influencer, no expert can tell you exactly how your body responds. Only your body can do that. Different people respond differently to the same foods. Your personal data is more valuable than any generalized recommendation. Use it. And finally, remember something important. You did not develop diabetes because of one dessert, and you will not improve your health because of one perfect meal. Health is built through patterns, repeated choices, consistent habits, small decisions made day after day. The goal is not deprivation. The goal is understanding. Because once you understand how food truly affects your body, fear begins to disappear. You stop viewing every dessert as an enemy. You stop making decisions based on marketing. You stop chasing labels designed to sell products. Instead, you start making choices based on evidence, experience, and common sense. And that changes everything. The truth is that ice cream was never the entire problem. The real issue was never a single scoop. It was the lack of accurate information surrounding it. Most people with diabetes were handed a list of foods to avoid. Very few were given a genuine understanding of why those foods behaved the way they did. And without that understanding, fear filled the gap. Now you have that information. You know which options deserve a place in your freezer. You know which products deserve caution. You know how context, timing, and combinations of food can change everything. And most importantly, you know that successful diabetes management does not require a life of constant restriction. It requires knowledge. It requires patience. It requires a willingness to pay attention to how your own body responds. Because the healthiest approach is not the one that removes all joy from eating. It's the one that gives you the confidence to enjoy food wisely while protecting your health for years to come. That confidence doesn't come from a label. It doesn't come from a trend. It doesn't come from fear. It comes from understanding. And now you have it.